had a judgment that had hundreds and hundreds of people across the world waiting with bated breath. The judgment on whether same-sex couples in India can be married and adopt children, basically live like a regular family. True, most people will argue that the actual number of people who would be affected by this judgment are very small, maybe even a minuscule minority. But their rights remain sacred nonetheless. But today that changed, because the Supreme Court today said that the right to marry itself is not a fundamental right, while recognizing that the idea of same-sex marriage is neither urban nor elitist. They said, what can we do? It's not for us to make a law, we can only interpret it. So as for the legal process, they have thrown the ball back into Parliament. If any amendment has to be made to the Special Marriage Act, it will have to be done only through the legislative process. But will the political parties, the legislature, be on board? At this point, it seems highly unlikely. Why? Take a look at some of the reactions that we have seen to the Supreme Court judgment through the day. The Congress remained ambivalent, saying that while their party stands for all citizens and wants to protect their freedoms and choices, liberties and rights, a comprehensive response will only be given after they have studied the judgment. The AIMIM went a step further. In fact, Asaduddin Owaisi stridently opposed the very idea of same-sex marriage and said that it was against the very tenets of Islam. The same was echoed by the Jamiat. The RSS said that the parliamentary democratic system will debate all aspects and reach a conclusion. The question then is, yes, there will be a committee to look at how the day-to-day lives of same-sex couples can be made easier. But is there really any time frame within which this committee will function? Is it on anyone's priority? And will the Parliament now legislate? Or is this pretty much the end of the road, and can we expect status quo on the entire issue? Joining us on the show is Mahesh Jethmalani, Member of Parliament of the Rajya Sabha and senior lawyer. So I want to start by asking you, what do you think was the main reason that today the court decided that they will not go ahead? Because remember, earlier the Chief Justice had said that this is something that they are very clear about, that same-sex couples deserve to live like any other couple. Then what changed today?
Well, intention is one thing, but when you find that the law is an impediment in your way, right, then the court is helpless. So if, for example, I mean, the issue on which the whole case turned, Padmaja, was that if the right to marry was interpreted as being a fundamental right out of the Constitution, if it flowed from the Constitution, then the court could have given relief. But the court found that the right to marry is not a fundamental right. It has to be statutorily conferred. The Supreme Court can't pass statutes, they can't legislate, which is why they eschewed jurisdiction, because they had none, and they tossed it back to that authority, which is really responsible and vested with the power to either recognize or not recognize same-sex marriage.
So what happens next? This committee, if and when it will be formed, how exactly is it going to make the lives of same-sex couples easier?
Well, first of all, I think they have to recognize what is lacking where same-sex couples are concerned. What are the disadvantages by not giving them this right? If same-sex couples can get all the rights or all the privileges which ensue upon being a married person, right, without them actually, getting married, without giving them the right to marry, if they can be given all those benefits, welfare benefits, etc., right, then perhaps they might stop short of that. But if there are certain rights attendant upon a marital relationship, which then require them to be married, they may then say that this is an issue for Parliament. The committee can be recommendatory, and it is going to do it expeditiously, right? So while the Supreme Court has shut one door, and rightly so, because the legislation on all they could have done. The best they could have done, Padmaja, right, is they could have said, we make a declaration that the right to marry is a constitutional right. But they couldn't change the existing marital laws, right, to accommodate that right to marry. Because marriage is not just a ceremony, right? It is a bundle of rights and liabilities, obligations, right? So, so marriage can be void for non-consummation. Now, how do you apply that to same-sex couples? Then what happens in divorce, adoption, and so on and so forth? These are all issues which are attendant upon marriage. Now, the existing legislation, you could not actually encompass all these rights where same-sex marriages were involved. Because the language, you'd have to torture the language, right? And it didn't contemplate it. Neither legislative intention behind all those statutes, right? Nor the actual language of those various provisions in those statutes permitted a construction which allowed same-sex marriage to be incorporated within the four corners of those statutes.
So let me just ask you very bluntly, for everyone watching right now, they will have some very basic concerns. If there is a same-sex couple, can they have each other as nominees, open joint bank accounts, list each other as next of kin? Is that going to be made possible after the findings of this committee?
Well, so now I'll tell you, if you look at the minority judgment, they said that the right to have a civil union does exist for same-sex couples as well. However, the majority rejected that view as well. They not only said that the right to marry is not a constitutional right, but they said even a civil union has to be recognized in statute, which means by parliament, the government. Right? So today, that's the consequence of the courts were very sympathetic, even the majority judgment, right? They went on a strict construction. They realized that they had problems. And since they took the view they did, both as regards marriage and civil unions, right? They then said that we're appointing a committee, a high-level committee to be headed by a cabinet secretary, right? To expeditiously go into this matter, to examine all issues pertaining to same sex and to see whether benefits which accrue to married couples to married heterosexual couples, can also be given simultaneously, right, to same-sex couples.
So you're a member of parliament. Let me ask you honestly, is it anyone's priority right now to even bring in such a legislation? Is there even some talk among our parliamentarians that this is a need? The court has spoken about it. Everyone's saying, oh, let's have a larger debate and all. Is there going to be any movement at all? Is anyone talking about it?
Look, we are, for one thing, let's look at the circumstances. We are on the verge of a fresh election. You're not going to see it in the 17th Lok Sabha, for sure. Not in this tenure. I think you definitely have to wait till the post-2024 and then see the atmosphere. And it's up to the same-sex couples to now come and put some pressure, right? They got to band together. They got to become a powerful electoral, component. Make sure that they have their voice heard during elections. That's how democracies work. It's, but if you're thinking that if it comes to parliament, if this committee does something by which it comes to parliament, I'm sure parliament will expeditiously and fairly look at it. But there's the other side. When you enact legislation, you have to take in all stakeholders. And you'll have to hear the stakeholders in the interest of natural justice who are opposed to same-sex marriage. And then applying the principle of the greatest good of the greatest number, which is the fundamental maxim for all legislation, right? You'll see what best result you can get. These are not easy answers.
Well, very difficult indeed. The struggle is going to be a long one. Mr. Mahesh Jethmalani, thanks very much for joining us. Let me